Our planet is just an absolutely dizzying collection of environments, right? From deserts that are scorching hot to the absolute deepest parts of the ocean. It's so huge and complex that just trying to wrap your head around it all can feel, well, a little overwhelming. But what if there was a simple way to map it all out? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? When you're faced with all this incredible diversity? I mean, where do you even start? Well, as it turns out, the first step is actually surprisingly simple. So in this explainer, we're not just going to list a bunch of dry facts. No, we're going to build a mental map together, a clear, logical way for you to classify and really understand pretty much any natural environment on Earth. And here's our route for the journey. First, we'll get organized. Then we'll draw that great divide between land and water. We'll take a quick tour of each, see where they collide, and then, at the end, you'll have your very own map of nature. Sound good? Let's go. Okay, the very first line we're going to draw on our map is probably the simplest one of all. It just splits the entire world into two categories: natural ecosystems and man-made ones. And for this trip, we are heading deep into the natural side of things. So, what do we even mean by natural? Well, we're talking about any system that's powered by the sun, the wind, the rain, and the tides, forces that are completely outside of human control. Everything we look at from this point forward is going to build on that one core idea. All right, now within that giant natural world, we draw our next line. And this one is fundamental. It's the great divide that splits everything into two enormous domains: land and water. And here's the key difference, the thing you gotta remember. For terrestrial, that's just the fancy word for land-based ecosystems, everything is basically governed by two things: moisture and temperature. But for aquatic ecosystems, it all boils down to just one critical factor: how much salt is in the water. So now that we've kind of drawn our continents, let's zoom in. We're going to explore the major regions on the land half of our map. These are the terrestrial ecosystems, or what scientists call biomes. Basically just large, distinct communities of life that are all shaped by a similar climate. Now, on land, it really boils down to four major types of these biomes. You can think of these as the main climate zones, or maybe even the countries on our map. You've got forests, grasslands, deserts, and the tundra. First up, let's talk about forests. From those dense tropical rainforests to the temperate forests you might have hiked through, these places are basically the planet's lungs. They thrive wherever the temperature and moisture are just right, and they pump out a huge amount of the oxygen we all breathe. Okay, so as things get a little drier, forests start to thin out and may give way to grasslands. Picture the African savanna. These are the places that support these massive herds of grazing animals. Now, if you push that dryness, that aridity, even further, you end up with deserts. But don't make the mistake of thinking they're empty. They're often home to some of the most specialized and resilient life on the planet. And finally, at the absolute coldest extremes of our planet, we find the tundra. I mean, it is so cold here that trees just can't grow, and the ground right below the surface is often permanently frozen solid in a layer called permafrost. All right, let's shake off the cold, leave the land behind, and take a dive into the other half of our map, the huge, interconnected world of aquatic ecosystems. It is truly incredible how one single factor, salinity, which we measure in parts per thousand, can organize all the water on Earth. It's so simple. At one end, you have fresh water with almost no salt. At the complete other end, you've got marine water with a lot of salt. And right there in the middle, you get this amazing mix of the two called brackish water. Let's just pause on that marine number for a second. 35 parts per thousand, or more. That is the threshold. That's the magic number for the open ocean, which happens to be the largest and, maybe the least explored ecosystem on our entire planet. And we can get even more detailed. Even inside that freshwater category, we can add another little line on our map. We can separate Lotic systems, that means running water like rivers and streams, from Lentic systems, which is still water like ponds and lakes. So we've mapped the land, we've mapped the water, but you know where things get really, really fascinating? It's in the places where those two worlds meet and collide, the coastlines and all those transitional zones. And wetlands are just a perfect example of this. They're often called the Earth's kidneys, which is a great analogy because they're so good at filtering pollutants.
And get this, they only cover about 6% of the Earth's land, but they're home to an incredible 40% of all plant and animal species. Just amazing. But there's another one of these in-between zones that is so unbelievably productive, so jam-packed with life, that scientists have actually given it a very special nickname to capture just how important it is. That's right, they're talking about coral reefs. You find them in these shallow, warm, tropical seas, and their biodiversity is just off the charts. They are literally the aquatic version of a rainforest. And they also provide this critical protection for our coastlines, a whole world thriving, right where the land meets the sea. So let's just step back and look at what we did. In just a few minutes, simply by drawing a few logical lines based on a couple of key factors, we've actually built a powerful working map of the entire natural world. And this is your key. This is your personal guide to that map. The next time you're out and about, you see any natural environment, just run through these steps. Is it land or water? If it's land, what's the temperature and moisture like? If it's water, how salty is it? You now have the basic tool to classify it. It's that simple. And that really leaves us with one last big thought. We started with what seemed like this overwhelmingly complex puzzle, right? And we found this simple, almost elegant structure hiding inside it all. So the question is, now that we have this map, how does seeing these fundamental connections, how does it change the way we see and maybe even the way we care for our planet?